God, our creator of all there is and ever shall be, we ask you to send your light down, granting all of our residents, city council, and our mayor to make the proper decision for our city, enhancing everything good in our city and allowing us all to appreciate it and protect it. For this we are thankful. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor Scott Tremblay.
Here.
Vice Mayor William Dittmer. Here. Councilwoman Jenny Sorrell.
Here.
Councilman Tom McClary.
Here.
Councilman Tom Kinsella. Here. City Attorney James Matthew.
Here.
City Manager Leonard Sossaman.
Here.
Thank you. At this time, I was looking for a motion to approve both sets of minutes.
Motion to approve both sets of minutes.
All in favor?
Aye.
At this time, we're going to open up comments from the general public. I'm going to start with Mr. Mueller. Welcome. Come on up.
Dave Mueller, 5439 Blue Point Drive. Thank you guys for letting me talk. Once again, I try to talk to a lot of folks, conversing through the community, transversing through the community. It seems that there's a lot of concern about speeding on Old Post Road, and I noted that the speed limit there currently is 30 miles an hour. That road probably gets the most pedestrian traffic, while Coon Road, up on the north end that heads out to the park, Brasher Park, is only at 20 miles an hour. Also on the Sunset on the south side, it's also 20 miles an hour. Maybe it would behoove us to kind of maybe re-look at all the roads in the city and come up with some happy median there that maybe will try to benefit the entire neighborhood, and maybe look at maybe lowering the speed limit potentially on Old Post and make it a little safer place to live. You know, that and Bay as well. Anyway, that's what I got.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Mueller.
you.
The next person I wanted to invite is Reverend Spaldy. Welcome. Come on up.
Sandra Spaldy, 8612 Green Street. Yes, I used to live on Old Post Road, and I will be moving back there. When I lived on Old Post Road, it was in the house right next to the park going north. I wanted to put a solid fence up around my dog's run, just in front, so the dogs would not bark at people walking by, and I was denied doing that. Well, now, the owners who own that house now have put a solid fence up from their house to the fence on the park. You can't see the water at all.
Do you know the address to that property?
Oh, yeah.
Can you give it to us, please?
Yes, let me see. 8206 Old Post Road. I'm in 8208 now, so I'll be.
And what kind of fence was erected, do you know? Was it wood? Was it white vinyl
It's
fence?
a white vinyl, solid. Now, the code has not changed, so please don't tell me the code allows it now if it didn't allow it then. And I was not allowed to put it up. And I had at that time 4 dogs, which I proceeded to train them not to bark at people walking, but it would have been a lot easier to have put a solid fence up there. Now, this one looks terrible. I don't know if anybody has seen it, but it's not very nice to the eyesight. And I don't think it's right for it to be up. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person I'd like to invite is Pastor Lord. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. We're getting into that season where we're all going to be busy and hopefully spending time with our families and blessing the community. So you should have gotten a flyer. And what we decided to do is, in all our busyness, is just work it in. Our third Wednesday luncheon is when we network people in the community to come together for just strategies to work together to make things better and serve one another. And so this is not a burden type thing. I realize with some of your obligations you can't be there, but for those that can, it would be wonderful. So simply says Somebody Cares Luncheon honoring city leaders. Come join us for a Thanksgiving lunch of appreciation for your service in our city, November 18th, 12 noon. That usually goes officially from about 12 to 1:30. But, you know, we'll just serve you any way we can. We would like to hear your heart, know how to pray for you, maybe personally pray for you. So if you can, that would be wonderful. If you can't, we understand. Just make that available so we can do that. Also, the fish fry is tomorrow night, and so that'll be starting at 6 o'clock. We were most of the day cleaning 100 pounds of fish today, and had a good time doing it, but we'll be looking forward to it. Also looking to work with Tom and the team on the Christmas. I know with the COVID there may be some changing, but just let us know, how we can help and be of service to you. We do have the tent up, it's available, and our parking lot, if there's something you can do, we can help out that way. And other than that, I just want to thank you. It's good to be in the city. When we got ready to put our new building up, we got the architect, and he said, well, the first thing you need to do is annex into the city of Port Richey, because you're going to go through 8 offices in Pasco County. It'll be a nightmare, but in the city, they'll work with you and it'll be more personal. So we did and got annexed in, and we're thankful for that. I want to thank Sean and the team for being there to help us get our properties cleaned up so they'd be more usable in the city. And with that, I just want to thank you, and with all the things coming up, just hope you have a blessed time, and may the Lord's peace rule in your heart. Lord bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Ward. There's the next person on the list I'd like to invite is Linda Rodriguez. Come on up.
Linda Rodriguez, 5917 Lantern Court. Coming here as the chairman of the CAC. I know you're all very patiently waiting for the names and what we've been doing with that project. Just to let y'all know, what we have done is we originally put it up on Facebook as just an open question. What are your names? And we got about 40 or 50 responses of many different names. As a committee, we went through them, we whittled them down. We got about 13 or 14. We put that back out on Facebook. Again, asking for vote for this. We did it on a Survey Monkey. So, one person couldn't vote 14 times for one name, so on and so forth. So we whittled that down to 3 names. So we have that now on the town hall site, the Port Richey Town Hall site. We're down to 3 names. We're down to Cody River Landing, that so far has 42 votes. Port Richey Riverside has 26, and Port Richey Pass has 7. It's still an ongoing survey. We have our meeting next week, and then we'll go from there, and we'll present it to you guys and see what y'all think. We look forward to helping you guys in any way we can with this project, because we all wanted to get going as well. So, any questions about that?
Thank you. When's the next CAC meeting?
The 1st.
Okay.
No, yes, the 1st. That's Thursday, right? When is my next CAC? The 5th, I lied.
The 5th. Okay.
I lied. November 5th.
Okay.
And we're also looking at doing a project, I don't think I spoke to Chief yet. We're getting the 6 new cars. So we talked about doing a blessing of the fleet and including the new fire truck. So we'd like to get with you guys and see what we could organize as a thing to do that. We would like to do that and help that. So, because we think that's a really great project, getting all the cars in the fire truck, so.
But you can't do the traditional thing and break a champagne bottle over the hood, though.
Sure,
You
why
can, you
not?
just got to repair it.
So, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all that I had signed up, but I see there's a lot of
Excuse me,
people.
it was 8207.
8207. Thank you. I see there's a lot of people here. Would anyone else like to speak? Seeing no hands, let's move on to the next item, which is going to be, what I wanted to know is would anyone be opposed to passing the comments from city manager and council? We do have someone on a Zoom waiting for us, And I'd like to handle the first item first and then go back to any comments. Is anyone opposed to that? Okay. At this time then, what I'd like to do is move on to the next item, which is going to be just the consent agenda. And I was looking for a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The next item is going to be council business, and we're going to handle the city manager search discussion. And I'm going to introduce that, if I may. And because our current city manager is, I think, one of the applicants, I'm asking that he not be involved in any of these discussions. Is the council okay with that? Okay. So any questions are going to go to Colin Benzinger, or our clerk, I think procedurally was handling everything. So I just wanted to remind everyone that. And at this time, Sal, are we ready for Colin?
Al, if you could turn the camera down a little so I can see them, that'd be helpful.
I'm going to have an issue with that because the camera is actually on the laptop, so it's only directed at me. So what I'll go ahead and do, I'm going to put you on the overhead so they'll get to see you.
Okay,
And we'll go from there.
sounds good.
Hey, Will, can you move your cup? Move your bottle.
Welcome, Colin Benzinger. It's Scott Trumley, the mayor. I wanted to thank you for all the hard work you've done. And what I wanted to do is turn this over to you for some opening comments and presentation. And then I was hoping we can follow up with some questions later, if that's okay.
Okay, I assume it's me. I'm having a little trouble hearing, so if I'm wrong, please let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Colin Benziger and Associates, and we're here to present, well, we've already presented paperwork for 5 candidates that we think are worthy of your consideration to be your next city manager. We're suggesting that you pick either 3 or 4 to actually interview. How we do those interviews is a little up in the air at the moment, whether we do some preliminary Skype interviews, whether we fly people in if need, to start with. That's something we can discuss later. But what I'd like to do is to get from each of you your selections to interview for the next city manager. Which of these 5 candidates you'd like to interview? And not sure the best way to do it. You do have a ballot. It would probably be best if you could mark that and give it to Sal. I assume you all have a ballot, and then he can read it to me and I can fill in the score sheet.
I suggest we all go with 3. 3.
I'm okay with 3, but before we go on the ballot, I wanted to know if we can have some discussion amongst council and share any thoughts, or do you think that's not a good idea?
I don't think you can
Sorry,
hear.
I heard something, but I couldn't hear what it was, so.
I wanted to know is, before we enter any ballots, whether or not that we can have some discussion amongst council for our opinions on each candidate before we do that, and kind of go from there.
It's purely your call, whatever you're most comfortable with. We usually suggest start with the ballot, because if you start with the ballot and none of you are interested in a particular candidate, then there's no need to discuss that one. On the other hand, if everybody's interested in a candidate or two, then there's probably not a lot of need to discuss that candidate. But it's whichever you're more comfortable with.
I think, yeah, and I think you're right then. It may streamline things if we just vote up front and see where we're all at. So, I didn't have a ballot though, so did everyone else have a ballot?
No, I have one.
If you don't have a ballot, you could just write it on a piece of paper. I can give you the names if you like. Or if Sal can allow me to share a screen, I can throw the names up.
Well, if you guys, on page 18, there's an email that has I think the 5 candidates that are left. Should we just use that, number it, and then submit it? Is everyone okay with that? You guys all right with that?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So it's going to be page 18, and it has, just for the record, Larry Capola is number 1 in terms of, and they're listed alphabetically apparently. Shane Crawford, number 2. John Dutt, or Dude, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, is number 3. Bill Shanahan, number 4, and Len Sossaman. So are we all on the same page?
Yes.
Okay. So if we can just take a moment to fill these out. Number, I guess, 1 in terms of who we want the most in terms of interview, and 5 who we do not. Is that how agreeable to?
Yeah, I'm not putting them in any particular order. I'm just saying, taking the 3 that have interested me. Yeah,
Okay, fair enough.
yeah, instead of rating them.
And we're going to do that by circling the 3 that we want to interview.
Well, I have my ballot, so I'm just handing in my ballot.
Okay, that's fine. The rest of us can circle 1 or circle 3? Okay.
Oh. Now everyone's got the ballot.
Here you go, Sal. Thank you.
Colin, can you hear me okay? Colin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay. So I have received all the ballots from council, and for our selections for our top 3, I'm going to look them over real quick for the 3 popular. Yep, that's exactly what I'm going to do.
And can we turn him up a little bit?
I have him all the way up.
Okay.
Is your volume all the way up, Colin?
Yeah, but you have his microphone, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, go ahead and talk one more time so we can check volume.
I'm sorry?
Is that better?
Much.
Okay. Yep. All right. For general consensus,
I'm sorry, who?
for consensus for the 3 top votes, okay, so our top 3 selection is going to be John M. I'm sorry, is it D-U-T-E? Is it Duddit?
Date.
Dutte, William P. Shanahan, and Leonard Sossaman.
Okay.
So Dutte, Shanahan, and Sossaman are our top 3.
Okay. So now we just have to discuss how we're going to interview them or how we're going to proceed.
And can I make a suggestion? I would like to fly or have interviews in person here in council chambers, if we can. I know that there's a little bit of expense to that, but I think meeting these folks in person is going to be important. I didn't know how everyone feels about that, and what I would like to do is set maybe a workshop to do this outside of a council meeting, where we come and we spend, for example, an hour per candidate during an interview process here in council chambers. And with that, I'll open it to you guys for any suggestions or comments.
Is our responsibility to pay for them?
Yes, we would have to pay travel.
Typical.
I do like the idea of meeting the candidates in person. So I would like to fly them in.
I agree too. We need to do this in person.
Let me ask a separate question, because there's some logistical difficulties in getting, well, what is 2 candidates out here at the same day, at the same time. Do we want to perhaps have a Zoom session first to see if we can further limit it down from 3 to 1 or 2? And then have a second, I mean, most interviews I've ever, there's usually 2 rounds to it regardless. Obviously, Colin's done a lot of work, a lot of the legwork initially. Do we want to start off with a less intrusive Zoom interview and then circle back to the, I agree that we should have a full in-person interview, but do we want to do it for the 2 candidates right away, or the 2 ones who have to fly in here, presuming Len doesn't need to fly in here? And see if there is a good enough fit, at least initially, to fly them in, and then limit it down from there.
In my humble opinion, I like the idea of in person, all 3. They're all very good candidates. They're all very well qualified. And I think that, in all fairness, it's just one of those I'd be more comfortable. Personally, I'd be more comfortable in person. And I think the expense for 2 plane tickets would be worthwhile through this process.
And hotels.
What's that?
And hotels.
Yes.
It's $1,000 a person usually, by the time you're done.
But that's just my humble opinion, but
Yeah, I'd still like the idea of go ahead and fly them in and do that process all at once.
and that's if they're willing to, to come fly in. I presume they will if we're paying for it, but that's kind of the direction I'd like to go.
Is there another separate, I know we're saying a workshop, is there a tour of the city or something else that we want to make part of this interview process? Is there stakeholders, other stakeholders besides council we may want them to meet? Police chief, I don't, whomever else, let's talk about this holistically for the day, I'll call it.
What I think we can do is potentially have the department heads here during the interview process. So if there's questions that because obviously the people we're interviewing are going to have questions about the city as well. It's going to be a two-way interview, I'm presuming. So if we have department heads here, I think it'll help the interview process in terms of supplying information. So I would like to have department heads here when we do the interview process. Now, if the department heads have questions, I don't know if it'll be inappropriate for them to ask, to submit questions that we may want to ask the candidates, or if we want to go that far in depth. But I'm open to however you guys want to do this.
Well, what's Colin's suggestion, or how does he, he's done more of these than I think all of us put together. Colin, are you there?
I am. I'm not really. I will speak up. Hopefully, you can hear me.
We can hear
I was
you.
having trouble following the discussion, so if someone could tell me what the question is, I'll be happy to answer it.
Yes, if you can hear me, pretty much the
Yes.
discussion amongst council is they would like to know what's the next process of interviews. They're discussing between flying the other two candidates in and having interviews that way, in-person interviews. Councilman McClary was asking about, is there a step-by-step interview process? Do we do phone interviews first and then in person? What's the status quo of what you've dealt with in the past?
Everything in the past is out the window with COVID, but having said that, what I've seen clients do typically, well, they've either done a Zoom interview first and then brought in their top choice or choices, or alternatively, they've just brought the candidates in and had them interview. I think as a practical matter, the one council that that did not bring the candidates in but did the Zoom interviews, it resulted in they brought their top-rated candidate in for an in-person interview and said, well, maybe not. They brought their second-rated candidate in and then said, well, maybe not. They got their third-rated candidate in and they said, this is the one. So I think you're probably better off, based on what I've seen in this current pandemic, just bringing them in for an interview and being done with it.
And can you ask him whether or not department heads should be present or involved in the interview process?
Did you hear that request?
No.
Okay, Mayor Tremblay asked if department heads would also be included during the interview process.
I think they should meet the candidates because they're going to be working with whoever is selected. And they can give the council feedback informally. I don't recommend formal written feedback because it could put the candidate, the department heads in a tricky position if the council decides that somebody other than their top choice is the person that is to be selected. The flip side of course, is it could put the council in an awkward spot if the staff says, we really like Joe and they really like Tom. So I think it's a good idea for them to meet. I think it's a good idea for them to, in some kind of informal setting, and then to give their feedback to the council members kind of indirectly.
Let me ask this question. How about setting up a day, whatever that day is, where during the day they meet the various department heads, Sal or some other tours the city. Again, it's not that big of a city, but at least that way the candidates who may not have had the benefit of seeing the city or have great familiarity are able to walk and talk and actually physically see something, and then they meet us in the evening or whatever we designate for the interview session. So it's more of a whole day affair. That way they meet the department heads, they get to see the city, and then they talk to us.
No, I like that idea.
And who's going to do that?
Our
Our city manager can't.
I think we've kind of appointed Sal our clerk thus far.
Sal's in charge.
So, and Sal's lived in the community for a long time, so I think he'd be able to.
Well, actually, maybe this is an opportunity to also bring in CAC too. And between
I'd like
Sal
that.
and CAC tour the city.
I like
And-
the idea of getting some input from the CAC, which are our citizens, and maybe be part of that walkabout, that tour. Still have the opportunity for the CAC to meet the candidates.
Well, if I may make a suggestion, if you're going to do that, you may want to open up City Hall just for an hour to meet and greet the different candidates, and then have just one person from the city take them on a tour through the city. But that way,
I think that's more
Yeah,
practical.
I don't think it should
A
be any
meet and
council
greet.
members though, as part of that.
no, I agree.
Yeah,
I
that should
agree.
be-
But I think if the CAC members or anyone from the general public wanted to come up and just shake hands and put a face with a name, if you set it up, maybe for an hour up here where people can mingle and meet everybody, I don't see why that would be a problem. And then after they meet everybody, go off with our designated tour guide to kind of see the city, and then come back, and then at that point, meet the department heads, and then, you know, we would interview at that point.
Seems like a good process.
I'm game. I like it.
And really, in no particular order, except for us being last.
Yeah, it's however the schedules work out best
Correct.
between, Sal's in charge, so he's gonna set up the whole itinerary.
Yeah, well, it's, so just to clarify, you want to fly in the candidates, and then what we'll do is that, and if I'm not correct, please correct me, we'll set up a time during that day where there'll be a small reception here at City Hall, which would include the CAC, maybe some members of, department head staff, do like a meet and greet, and then the rest of the day, or some of the day, would be part of that tour around the city. And then that evening, or later on that day, we do the interview process with council.
And but before the meeting, after they've seen the city, meet with the department heads, so they may have questions about certain parts of the city that, that department heads could answer to, because they're going to go out and see the city, so they may.
And I'll schedule that, there will be like an hour block for this, and then an hour block for that.
Okay.
And I'll come up with an itinerary plan and inform you and send it out to you. But, are we doing both candidates flying in at the same time, doing that tour, so to speak, and then you'll interview them separately?
Yes, I think so. So that way, we don't have to open City Hall and invite the public up for each person. You just do it all in one shot.
Do it all in one shot? And
So we're
then-
gonna have a 3-hour workshop in the evening at some point, basically, where we interview them. They're gonna have an hour where they meet the department heads. They're gonna have an hour reception at City Hall for anyone who may want to come in or whatever. And then they're gonna have a 2-hour block where they walk or whatever the city. And then they come and roll into the final interview session.
Okay,
And then we go from there.
So I think our next step would have to be just to select or get in contact with them to see about availability.
Well, that would be Colin.
And
He'll do that part.
Yeah. I think Colin can coordinate all that as long as we can pick a date and time that works. I'm sure he'll contact us and we'll set it up.
so, Colin, did you get to hear any of this conversation we had, or do you want me to just reiterate?
I heard some of it. I heard your recap, Sal. It sounded like we were going to have a tour of the city. We were going to have a reception for the public. We were going to have an evening interview session with the city council. The only thing I would suggest also is, if possible, for those of you who can, that you do one-on-one interviews with the candidates. Because I think it's very important that you test the chemistry with the candidates and make sure you're comfortable with that candidate. I've seen situations where we don't do it this way, but one of our competitors a few years ago did just a bulk interview session with the full council, and when the manager showed up, it turned out that nobody could work with him. So I think it's important that you have an opportunity to test the chemistry between each council member and each candidate.
Okay.
And I can work with you on the
This is
schedule.
gonna become
We
a
can put
logistics
that all
nightmare.
into one day. That's not an issue. And, if somebody can't meet in person, then we can do a telephone interview a
Well-
day or two before.
And that's my thoughts, that you're going to go ahead and reach out to our three selections, and then coordinate a time, a day in the future that we can get them here, and all three of them, and then we'll work out an itinerary for that particular day.
Maybe the Zoom sessions are an opportunity to get that one-on-one discussion we were talking about, or that Colin was talking about. Meet with all the candidates one-on-one via Zoom. You're not holding any judgments or anything, and then do the whole day thing, and then do the night thing.
Well, in the past, I thought worked well when we did it before, was candidates out there on the phone. We did it that way for most of them. But it was nice hearing the questions that were generated from the other council members. Some of them obviously were duplicates, but it helped in feeding off. Because a lot of times somebody comes up with a great question, like, oh yeah, so what about this? So I'm not too sure about individual, each of us doing it individually. I think we would learn more and get more out of it as a group.
I agree, and I think the public, if we do it that way, during that process, they're invited in, aren't they, to watch?
It's a workshop, yeah, so they would be invited in.
And I kind of like, in our particular community, being able to do this interview process in the open, where the public sees, they know what we ask, and we do it collectively. And I think when you're talking individually, kind of behind the scenes with people, you lose that, a little bit of that transparency. So I like doing it just out in the open, if we can, would be my opinion.
The next step is then finding out the policy availability.
Correct. Well, I didn't know if you guys felt the same way, or if you want to talk to these folks individually. That's just my opinion. I'm comfortable just doing it here in council chambers with everybody here.
I'm comfortable with the panel type interview too.
I agree.
Okay. So, by consensus, is that the direction that we're going to go here?
I think
Yes.
so.
Or do you want to talk to people individually? That's fine.
I've been part of those panel interviews, and they're very intimidating to a candidate. I've been on the receiving end. I've been the one there, and it's just a very intimidating atmosphere, just by its very nature. And sometimes you don't get a lot of, at least my impression of it, and I could be biased on it, is you don't get the full feedback, and you know. You don't get the full impression of the person because of that intimidation.
Can I?
It could be personal bias on my part too. So
Well, it's an intimidating city, so it's something that you're going to have to do.
Yeah, if they can't make it through the interview, they
Can
job.
Correct.
That's my only hesitation to it.
Can I make a recommendation?
Of course.
If you want, because during that day and, and we're pretty much making this an entire day affair, we could schedule with that where council before the actual workshop has one-on-one time with those candidates. If they
We
want.
could and just rotate through, but I'm comfortable just as a panel. But like I said, if the council, the majority of the council wants individual time with each one of these folks, then I'm fine with that too.
I think by consensus.
I think we're our panel.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah,
we
by
need more
consensus, I'm outvoted, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, so just to kind of sum up the game plan, we'd have a day where they come in, meet the public, take a tour, meet the department heads, and then we'll interview as a panel with the public here. And by then, the public and department heads and everyone will have met some of these folks potentially, and if they want to comment during the comment section, then we can hear everyone's comments as well.
Now, we're going to have the workshop, we're going to meet and greet. Is the intent to make a decision that night or follow up at a later date with the decision? Because, and here's the reasoning for my question. The department heads are going to meet the people. Some of us may want to seek some feedback from the various department heads. So if we're making a decision that night, we may not necessarily have an opportunity between, the department heads speaking and everyone doing tours and every other thing that may be part of it. We won't have an opportunity to solicit or discuss some of that feedback. So I'm just trying to clarify, we're not going to be making a decision on that workshop night.
Well,
That is, yeah, okay.
But that's up to you guys. If there's a motion and a second
You
and a
will-
discussion and you vote, or we vote, it is,
If
you
this-
know, you guys can do that at any time.
If this is considered a workshop session.
So
you
we
will-
can't do it then.
Okay, good.
No motions will be made.
So we would have to put it as an agenda item. and
On a
then
future
go from
On the
meeting.
there.
on the
regardless.
following
Yeah.
meeting is what I would recommend.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay,
Yeah, I'd much rather do that, so that's good.
okay. I'm comfortable with that.
Okay,
Let's
just,
do it.
Colin, are you there?
I am,
Okay.
I am.
So from consensus of council, what we're going to go ahead and do, if you can go ahead and schedule, what we're looking at is a Friday, that we can set up a Friday, that way the candidates can come down here.
A Friday?
We'll have a Friday with them. And you'll have to let us know, so council can see if they're available for that day as well.
Okay, would we want to shoot for,
Before the next council.
like the 6th or the 13th? Does anybody know offhand which would be better, or?
In my opinion, the sooner the better, so if we could do the 6th.
Then we'd have a
That's next
council
week.
meeting.
Huh?
We'd have a council meeting right after that.
on that Tuesday, so we'd have a few days to process everything. Is everybody okay with the 6th?
I'm
Good.
open.
You want?
I'll
Yeah,
be
I can
here.
do it. So this is the evening, Friday evening for us, from our perspective?
Correct.
Okay, yes.
So the 6th. yeah.
Colin, I have consensus for the 6th. Do you think that's enough time to make something happen? And let us know if we can,
Oh, well, can we do the backup for the 13th? Because he's got to coordinate two candidates as well, so there may be.
Yeah, I like the idea of having a backup date as well.
The 13th
The
is
13th.
is fine for me. I'm booked up all day I have court all day, but I'll be free by 4 or 5 o'clock when we would meet.
Which
so,
would work fine, yeah.
Yeah.
all right, so we're scheduling the 6th, but using the 13th as a backup in case any of the candidates are not available on the 6th.
Okay. I got the 6th as the first choice and the backup is the 13th. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Well, I'll start calling some candidates. And get back to you
I
hopefully
think one of
tomorrow.
them already knows about it.
All right then, if there's anything else.
No, not with Colin.
All right, Colin, we'll leave it with that, and thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you all. It's been a pleasure. We'll get the technical stuff worked out for the next time.
Yes, this was the first time for the visual Zoom, so we'll definitely work on that. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, and then the only other thing I wanted to comment on for this is, Sal, can you have it on the agenda meeting after the 6th? If we do it on the 6th, if it's not, we would just put it on the meeting after?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, we kind of went out of order. I wanted to, at this time, go back to comments from city manager and the council, because we really didn't have any opportunity for opening comments. I wanted to get Colin Basinger and that out of the way since he was waiting on Zoom. So I wanted to turn it over for, oh, we have another speaker, so let's do the next item and then we'll go back to comment. Thank you, I'm sorry. The next item up on council business is the city building department permit fee schedule study. And that I'm going to invite Mr. Sossaman for introduction.
Yes, Mayor. He's standing at the podium. Norman Brun. I hope I pronounced his last name right. It's not as bad as Sossaman, but he has conducted the study for us. He's working on it for a few months. I think started back in something like April or May. So there's some laws that come into place. So he's going to explain those to you, as well as the legitimacy of the report. That is, has to be defensible, and he will tell you all about that as well. I'll just let you know that he's worked very closely with Dallas, and Jim and I have met with him along with Dallas and Veronica, who's both are here tonight, and he's very well respected. He's done this at a number of places in the state of Florida and elsewhere. So with that, Norman Brun.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members, Mr. Manager. Thank you very much for that introduction. Mr. Attorney. The building department industry is changing pretty rapidly in Florida as we speak. Things are just coming in and out. New laws are being passed. One of the biggest laws that was passed last year was that building departments are going to have to start reporting and posting online that report. The report includes the number of inspections, the number of plans that were reviewed, projects that were done. Basically, accounting for the money that you're spending in the building department, it needs to be online for the public to be able to see. Along with that, the fee schedule needs to be posted online as well. All of this is in an effort to put together a more transparent building department fee so that contractors can understand where their money is going. And so in an effort to do that here in the city of Port Richey, we looked at your existing fee schedule, which hadn't been revised since 2005. And we know that there's been some real economic changes. So one of the things that we're going to do and that this report recommends is that Dallas is going to be in front of you at least once every 6 months, twice a year, talking about what his fee schedule is. And so what we've done is we've adjusted the fee schedule so that the method of fee is going to be a percentage, and it's going to be very simple to adjust. Rather than coming in and having to go through line item after line item of what things are going to cost, we can look at that percentage, look at what the budget is for the annual year, and go ahead and adjust that percentage so that we can estimate that we're going to collect enough money to pay for the building department staffing and all of the services. And so our goal is to look to try to get those to match up. Now, one of the things that's come of this is the state actually made a recommendation, which they normally don't on building department fees, that a city maintain some type of surplus. And they've allowed that surplus to go up to 4 years. Now, my recommendation is a 2-year minimum surplus. That may need to change, but that surplus is there. So when we have economic difficulties, we don't want to be in a position of laying staff off. We want to be able to have that there without charging a customer $300 for a fence permit to maintain staff. We want to be able to keep that staff on. And in doing that, we want to be able to look to that reserve to carry us through some of those economic downturns. And again, the purpose in looking at that fee schedule biannually is going to be real simple. Middle of the year, you're going to be able to look at your budget and see how much money have you spent, how much money you have left, and how many of those surprise jobs came in that you ended up with a little bit more money in the coffers than you thought, or maybe a little bit less and things slowed up and it's time to increase the fees a little bit to try to catch that up. So when we looked at your fee schedule, it was out of date pretty bad. There were some laws that were for some fees. I'm sure the building department, in speaking with them, had made the changes, but your ordinance hadn't caught up to those changes. So we corrected those as well. Those were some simple taxes that were charged by the state. It used to be called a radon fee. It's basically fees that are there to support people who are robbed by contractors or misled by contractors. And so there's a fund that the state collects off of permits to help those individuals out. And then the other is to support the Florida Building Commission. And so that they can pay for the hotels and for their commission meetings. They collect money from each building department to help with that through the process of the Florida Building Code. So those two fees have been updated as well. If you go through the report, you'll see that we've made some pretty simple recommendations. There's nothing overwhelming in here. The biggest thing that we've really done is just cleaned things up and made it simple so that we can move forward and the building department can easily adjust their fees to keep up with where they're at and the new requirements for posting. So I'm going to go through the recommendations real quick, just so everybody kind of understands where we're at in some of the items. If you have questions as we go through, please ask. Remove the permit application of $40. There was an application fee of $40 for every permit. We just added that into a minimum permit fee. That minimum permit fee should cover the cost of the smallest permit and what it's going to cost the city for that permit. We estimate that at about $90. So if somebody comes in for a simple permit that includes all the processing of the permit, the building official doing a plan review, going out and doing an inspection, and then the closing of that permit, and then digitizing everything for records, it's about $90 is what it costs the city for the smallest permit. So with that, we've added a minimum permit fee instead of an application fee of $90.
Can you give an example, like a fence permit or something like that?
Yep.
Okay.
And so if you look back, let's see the page prior to, so it'd be page 6. So a fence permit for the existing permit would have been $88. It's now going to be $90.
Okay.
And so there's not a big difference in what we're changing, especially as we stay in smaller permits. You'll see a much larger change as we get into larger permits. And that's because that minimum fee is going to cover most of these small permits. So moving on through the list of things, we're recommending adjusting the rate that today is 2.4 to 3%. Now again, that sounds like a big increase, but on most of the permits that we would do in this city, we're going to take out that $40 for that 3%. So the first $40 is going to come up a little bit easier. So we're not really raising the price of those small permits very much. Remove the plan review fees. Again, there were additional fees in the permit schedule so that it was kind of a menu item that you would go through. And so a homeowner wouldn't have that transparency of knowing what their permit fee was going to be. It was, well, it's this, plus this, plus this, plus this, and which applies, which doesn't apply. And so by moving all those into a single place, again, it's going to be easy for us to adjust it mid-year, where we're not adjusting a lot of fees. So we've removed the plan review fee as a separate item and included it in at 3%. We've also created recommending to create a surcharge of 1.5% of the permit fee to cover the cost of technology. So one of the things that the state's requiring now is that a building department has to post weekly their activity report. That's going to cost the city money. We're going to have to look to our web designers, we're going to have to look to our computer maintenance, and we're going to have to get those reports out and get them posted weekly. And again, there's going to be a cost associated with that. So in an effort to try to bring these costs and bring them within the building department so that they don't continue to run over into the general fund, we want to be able to identify those. And so by collecting that small fee, again, Dallas or Veronica can come in here mid-year and say, look, you know, our technology costs are exceeding what we anticipated. We need to adjust this fee. And with the remaining portion of the year, we can adjust it by this much, and it we'll be in a good place. And so we've added that in there as a recommendation. This also will cover simple things like new hardware, new software. I noticed that a lot of that stuff's not included in the budget today. It should be identified in the building department budget in the future if we can get that accomplished. And that's not always easy when we do it as a group, especially in a small community like this. The other is correct the state surcharges. We did that, which is again the 2 fees for the building, Florida Building Code, as well as the, I forget the other one now. You had a continuing education fee. We changed the method that fee is calculated so that it would remain at approximately equal rate, but we changed it so it would be the same method of calculation as the other taxes and other fees. Again, the reason of that is to try to make it simple both in the computer and in creating the actual calculations for these fees, as well as for the staff and residents to be able to understand it. That was a square footage, so it was based on the square footage of the project. Now it'll be based on a percentage of the permit fee. We removed some permit fees and consolidated others in through the administrative fees. The overall effect of that consolidation is we went from 5 to 6 pages of fees to 2 pages of fees. And so all of this together has very, very much narrowed the fee schedule down so that it's easier to understand, much more transparent for everybody involved, so that everybody's going to understand what their fees are going to be. We adjusted some of the administrative fees to more closely represent the cost of actual providing the service. And so by bringing those in to represent the cost, it again provides that transparency for the community to understand why they're paying this much for something, and it's because that's what it costs the city. And remember, building permit fees are supposed to be paid by the user. The whole intent is the user pays for this service so that the general public doesn't pay for somebody else's addition. We removed some erroneous items that weren't being used any longer, that were just outdated. Provided the new list of administrative fees. We recommend creating an enterprise fund for both the continuing education and technology for those 2 new fees. The idea for that is that the building department staff can track those 2 funds, and they're separate enough so that it doesn't just blend in and do we have enough money left for computers? We can look in that account.
And I kind of had a question along those lines, because one of I think the biggest issues for a small city, which you've probably dealt with in the past, is actually training someone to someone's going to have to manually post all that. Not only takes man hours, it's going to take some education and training. What are your recommendations for a small city? Are small cities actually outsourcing that to a computer person? Are they training an employee? Are they hiring a new employee? What's the kind of recommended move for a small city?
A lot of that depends on how you manage your website today. It can be done either way. In this community, I think you have very capable staff. I would like to see outsource the requirement for the report itself so that your computer programmer can create the reports weekly with a push of the button from staff. So they'll have to go in, set those reports up, make them available so that they can put a date range in and say, okay, this is this date range. We're going to print that report. Now, how you get that report onto the website is going to really depend on how your website is managed. Whether or not you have a outsourced web manager that does everything and you guys just send it what you need, or somebody in-house is providing that service today. And I've seen it both ways. The easiest method that I think this works is that your building department computer program automatically, Friday night at midnight, spits out a report and it gets emailed to whoever's loading it into the web. And they have a very simple task. Sometime over the weekend, they post it so that it's there Monday morning.
And then the upshot for the general public is they can go onto the city website. There'll be a link there, click on it, and see
How
all the
many
information.
inspections were performed, you know.
Okay.
Again, an activity report. This all comes from much larger cities. I'll give an example of, you know, the city of Fort Lauderdale is a really big city. They're somebody that when they see a change in permit fee collection, it may be in the millions of dollars. You know, we anticipated we were building 3 high-rise buildings this year and we built 6. Okay, well, we collected 20 million extra dollars or whatever that number would be. And so, you know, the building public is out there going, wait a minute, where'd all our money go? What are you guys doing with this? And so, you know, we get caught in small communities like this in some of that stuff that's really designed for a larger community, but that's where it's coming from.
But it still has to be done in a small community. That's
exactly
that's
it.
the problem. So.
And the legislator has acknowledged that this would be that this would not be funded, that this is an unfunded mandate. And that is in the staff report from the state of Florida.
Thank you. I just was curious about that because, you know, looking at city resources, trying to balance, at least making sure that our city management has the right resources to hire enough people or outsource or whatever. We want to make sure that he's got enough to work with. So.
And that's what that technology fee will do. It's going to take a little while for it to catch up. But once you're at that point where you're collecting enough money, you're 6 months or 12 months in, you're going to be able to start collecting enough money to pay for whatever direction that the city manager determines that needs to go, or the Dallas determines that needs to go.
All right. Thank you.
The last thing is again, we go back to the surplus. I recommend that you have a 2-year surplus. That'll be something that Dallas and Veronica will bring back to you here in the near future to identify how you're going to start doing that. That's a big bump right now. And so we've recommended that we don't look toward that until we start seeing how the fee schedule works out. And then the last thing is, I recommend that the building department get switched over to an enterprise fund. And that's something that the city manager needs to address and make a decision on with the finance director. But again, it just provides clean water for everybody to look through and be able to see what the building department's doing, especially knowing that we have all these laws coming down that are going in that direction. You want to try to become as transparent as possible in that thing. And the state allowing 4 years of surplus really puts you in a pretty good place to be able to maintain a surplus while doing that.
Do the small cities that you've dealt with, because a larger city, an enterprise fund would really make a lot of sense because you got a lot of money coming through, but are smaller cities following that trend that you've dealt with?
You know, it really hasn't been divided between the size of the city. It's really a preference between the finance director and the manager.
Okay.
That's what I've seen the most of. Some are really for it, some are really against it. again, looking at your budget and the way that your budget works out, and knowing that you guys are looking to keep this balanced, I think separating it personally makes it a much easier effort for the building department to maintain and allow them to actually manage their fees.
For our city.
And I might not recommend that in a larger city, but again, it's still something that needs to be addressed, how that goes. The other thing that works well for the enterprise fund is it allows the building department to identify all of its expenses. You know, things that some people don't think about is there's no expenses today being charged to the building department for the use of this building, but there's a cost associated with the use of this building. And there's a lot of things that in part of the fee schedule, in part of the budget, has been, because of the size of the city, absorbed within the general fund. And I think over time, with the scrutiny that we're seeing, that's something you guys are gonna need to look at in the future to start bringing some of that stuff out.
Can I ask you a question? So right now, if there's no enterprise fund, the revenue from, and it may be a question for city attorney or city management, that money would not necessarily go back into the building department, but does that go back into the general fund, or is that separated out anyways?
It should be separated out anyway.
Okay.
Should be, but it's not. It all goes into that black hole called the general fund.
It goes back into the general fund?
Yes, but I have, as you know, I've been working with George, and just as soon as he and I have a chance, and I've talked to Dallas and Veronica about it, we're going to be developing that enterprise fund for you. As a matter of fact, because what I discovered putting the budget together last year, and I'll talk more about that in a little while, is that you know, you didn't have everything separated out because your operating account doesn't distinguish between whether it's a dollar that comes from Dallas's and Veronica's efforts over in building and codes, zoning, or whether it comes from water and sewer, or whether it comes from somebody paying their taxes.
But the drawback is if it goes to an enterprise fund, it becomes restricted funding.
It's restricted under state law now.
Anyways.
Yeah, state law actually reads that
That's what I was going to ask the attorney next. but-
these fees and any fines or investment earnings related to these fees shall be used solely for the carrying out of the local government's responsibilities in enforcing the Florida Building Code. And then it goes on to talk about things that are excluded, planning and zoning fees. You can't pay for the planning and zoning tech out of building department fees. And so, again, the law is there to support it. It's just, I don't know whether there's any real consequences if you don't follow the law.
And I wanted to invite our city attorney to comment. I was curious.
Yeah, just so the council understands this in a larger sense, because and the seriousness of this, there is consequences, because I defended the lawsuit, trust me, there's consequences. What happened here, and just, we need to do this, and what you do, that's up to the council, but in 2008, the state passed a law that said you couldn't make money in your building department, okay? It had to be reflective of what I call a closed accounting system. What you charge has to be reflective of your overhead and your income, okay? That's in 2008. They passed that law, and we had a very large project at that time, and when you have a large project in a small city, you bring in this much money when usually you're bringing in this much money. So we got sued on that, but the problem is they sued 1 year too soon. It didn't go into effect the next year. Someone didn't read the fine print of that, and we had that defeated, so I then had left being the city attorney. When I came back 4 years ago, I said, well, have you done that? No one's done it. So for 4 years, we've been lucky. You know, for 6 years, we were lucky. Now, well, there weren't that many major projects. Generally, someone that's paying $3,000 fees isn't going to sue you, but someone that pays one of these large projects, it's $300,000-400,000. I'm sure you've seen that. You know, they're going to say, hey, what the heck? You know what I mean? Your entire department only cost $150,000. So you're mandated by state law to look back, and you can't. In other words, you could always make more money in 1 year, but you got to be able to defend why you have a certain rate each and every year. Matter of fact, our code requires that we look at it biannually, just for that reason, under the state statute. So then what happened was, to make it matters worse, we've never done that, and we've been very lucky. Last year, they passed a law that goes into effect December, and Mr. Bruin's believe me, I've chatted with him, so he understands this like the back of his head. Right, December of 2020, the law goes into effect. That now, we have to post all this information. We can do some other things, but we can roll it forward 4 years and all these type of things. So Number one, we have to do a certain amount of things right now to get it posted on our website. So what Mr. Brun is doing is he's simplifying it for us, okay? Number one, he's looked at our fees and he can defend this, you know, for what we're doing now. And then he's also putting something in effect that we can do this every 6 months so we don't have to worry about getting sued. And we've got a couple of big projects that may come in. So we don't have a choice to do this. So we're doing two major things here. And this hasn't been done since 2005.
So, oh, go ahead. Well, what I
It's
was
very
gonna-
complicated what's going on
What I was
here.
going to ask you procedurally, if the council is going to take action, could the council frame a motion so it would be to follow the recommendations, or is that not specific enough?
No, you have enough information. As a matter of fact, it's going to take a pretty serious ordinance, and Mr. Brun and I have discussed this already. And you could put something into effect, you know, January 1st here. That's what we're planning on. And you could change it 5 days later, okay, the numbers. But in terms of structure, vote on it. Do you understand what I mean? He can back up these figures. If you want to go to more detailed numbers, the more you do, the more expensive it's going to be to keep up on it, whoever's doing this every 6 months.
Well, no, I like the way
You could have a very general one. He's already got the essence of the fees in here. We'd have to make some other changes to our code for compliance, but
we would also have to have a separate motion to switch it from going into general fund to an enterprise fund, correct or no?
that's an accounting issue. You don't have to vote on that, whether, you know.
Okay.
That's an accounting issue for us.
And Mr. McCleary, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So the 3% for permit fees that you're setting here would actually be reevaluated every 6 months based on the
Right.
recommendations. So for the foreseeable future, it's 3%, but if we get some very large projects, that increases the overall enterprise fund, and then that would essentially, that would bring you up to your 4-year or your 2-year carryover. So then you would be reducing the permit fees down to accommodate and kind of keep everything in balance, is
So
the
that's-
intent.
That's one of the items we put at the base of the
Yes.
proposed fee schedule is that a project that's over $1.5 million, we need to give the building official the opportunity to sit down with that developer under the auspice of the city manager and the attorney and of course the finance director, and come to an agreement about what the cost of that project's going to be to the city and collect funds appropriately. Today, if you got a $15 million project that came into the city at 3%, you'd be doing quite well for a long time. I mean, that would provide you with an annual budget in one lump sum. Now again, you're allowed to collect that under Florida law up to 1 year's annual thing. In 1 year, you can't collect more than double your annual expenditures.
Well, can I ask you a question about that then? So if a very large project came in, could the building official and city officials bring it before council to say, well, because of the amount coming in, we're going to charge this particular project 2% versus 3%, because that's going to cover cost on an individual basis?
And now I've added it to the fee schedule in some language that would keep it out of council. But of course, that would be something that you could bring in front of council. But my recommendation in the fee schedule is that so that you're not inundated with that if things change in the future and you start to grow, or we get 3 big projects in at once, and then all of a sudden the fees become a political thing, and we would prefer them not to be a political thing. Really just represent the cost. And remember,
Well, who would monitor that though? Who would make that decision?
the way I've said it, the way I wrote it in here was a recommended permit fee. The final permit fee must be reviewed and approved by the city manager, finance director, and the building official.
Okay.
The intent of this section is to maintain a fair and fiscally responsible permit fee.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Is there a feasibility, here's the other concern, let's say we have 2 big projects, and I know we're kind of getting into hypotheticals here. Is there a minimum fee that is recommended? So for instance, let's say, you know, our annual operating is $300,000, as you noted in the report. You have a fee that generates $200,000, so now you're at $550,000. Then you have a third project comes in that gets you over your 1-year double. Theoretically, that third project gets a heck of a discount and goes down to almost 0 in their permit fees, which poses another problem. Now, number 2 is complaining, wait a minute, I paid 2%, and number 3 is saying I paid 0.5%. How do we rectify that?
Well, let's first off hope that that happens. So
Again,
it
it's
seems like-
a good problem from a city
On the
standpoint.
other side of that is if you start to get those large projects in, Dallas is gonna need help and it's gonna cost the city more. Their budget's going to go up because we're gonna need to have additional services here. If we were to get 3 large projects in the city, the answer to the question is, you're gonna have to sit down with the manager if that arises to determine the best direction to go. But most of these large projects are gonna carry 2 to 3 years. And so those fees shouldn't be recognized all in 1 year. If we're gonna do a project that's estimated to last 24 months, we should only be recognizing 50% of that up front. Or if the building official says, look, 80% of the work's gonna occur in the first year and 20% in the second, then those funds should be realized in the second year, because that's when the expenses are gonna come. Again, that's something that your finance director is gonna have to work out with how that works within the city. That will be easier with an enterprise fund though, so that money's not mixed in and just kind of disappears or wanders away to some other project or capital improvement somewhere. It's gonna allow everybody the opportunity to see that separately. But yeah, there's not a lot. The legislature did not leave room for that to occur. For a small city to become active in a quick turn, there would be some consequences.
So I'm just thinking, is there, as part of this, should we put a mandatory minimum in? That's the only reason I'm saying that, so you can't play favorites per se, because theoretically, one person could come in, and I'm not saying this would ever happen, but it's feasible. One guy gets a great deal, another guy doesn't get a great deal, and then that puts kind of in us in a bit of a bind a different way.
Well, I think we're lucky that that probably won't happen because you don't have too much area to develop within the city. I mean, you only got to.
Oh, redevelopment. You're going to start getting into redevelopment in this city.
This community is very undeveloped in compared to the state of Florida as far as
Okay.
everything south of you. You guys are going to start seeing, if our economy doesn't start to step down, you're going to start seeing larger and larger projects stepping in as redevelopment here.
But I guess I think to alleviate your issue is if we hit that cap to where we're charging too much, I think our overhead's going to go up. You're going to have to hire more people, and then it'll just balance out naturally anyways, is what I think he's saying.
And
Is that correct?
I also think at this point, this is something that should be brought to the state legislature, because again, when you compare this to a large city, it's pretty difficult to collect, double your annual when you're collecting $12 million a year as your annual budget. It's unlikely you're gonna get to that 24 mark. But in this community at $400,000 as a round number for an annual budget, it wouldn't be overwhelming to get there. But again, I think the best way to be able to control that would be look at a project. When you have a project that comes in that's gonna be, a $5 million project, they're not doing that in 6 months. That project is gonna last a little bit longer and start dragging through.
You can do $5 million in 6 months.
Yeah, no, you can do $5 million in a single-family home in 6 months, unfortunately.
Trust me, you can do $5 million in 6 months.
It's something that's gonna have to be monitored. I don't have an answer under the state statute now, and that statute is part of your report there. It's highlighted, it starts at the bottom of the page, and it's section 7A of 553. I don't have a good answer for you, except again, you guys need to be able to monitor it, and hopefully, when those larger projects come through, there's a lot of lead time that comes with those, through the planning and zoning process, and the other approval processes with the city, that you guys can start to address that as you go through the year, rather than waiting until they're standing on the doorstep with an application. Which hopefully that caveat at the bottom of the recommended fee schedule gives Dallas and Veronica that opportunity to, look toward that and start coming up with solutions.
Mr. Broom, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the statute also gives the right to the builder to engage their own inspectors, right? And
Yes.
that's really becoming very popular. I have this right? And so now it makes it even more complicated. So I assure you, I think we did this, I don't know, Abigail Court maybe, that's pre you. They're going to come in and say, look, we're not paying that. We're going to inspect it ourselves and use an independent third-party service. They have an absolute right to do that. It's more and more, and it's cheap. We're competing with them. Mr. Broom could tell you that. So you have that issue going on. And I could tell you from the $6 or $7 million project I was referring to before, when it's that much in building fees, you know, Mr. Winch couldn't do it. We hired people to do it, so our expenses went up. I mean, on a $5 million project, you know, we could only do, one person can't do $5 million. You know, and you know, $500,000 in fees to us. You couldn't do that many inspections if you wanted to. Matter of fact, we didn't do the inspections at Abigail Court.
And
Yeah, if you could explain that,
correct me
Mr. Brune,
correct me
I'd
if I'm wrong,
appreciate it.
Dallas, you do have a contract today for assistance if things get out of hand. You have a backup contract with a company to provide services. And so what the attorney is talking about is private provider laws. And so over the last, well, about 15 years ago, the state said, well, we can have a private provider. An owner, a deed holder, can decide for any of their improvements to hire their own inspection company. Up until this year, you were allowed to hire that inspection company, but the city still had the right to go out and monitor and do inspections, which would not reduce any cost to the city if we were going to do a 100% audit. That's great, you got your guy there, but we're going to come out and make sure that everybody's doing it right. Well, at the beginning of 2020, they changed that. And so now, private provider, Dallas can only do 4 audits a year on any single company. And so what that means is if somebody came in to build an apartment complex that had 500 inspections, Dallas could legally do 4 if they chose to hire a private company.
But you still have the overhead where we have someone having to input all this stuff, and so we still have all this other overhead even though they're doing their own inspection.
Yes, and the statute clearly states that you can charge a permit fee for the cost to the city. That's one of the reasons that caveat is at the end of the fee schedule there, is because there is going to be a time where you are competing for that business. And as I told Dallas and Veronica, and the manager and the attorney, is at this point, when you know large projects are coming in, the building department needs to reach out to that contractor and start early, talking to them about the services they're going to be able to provide. That may increase your budget. Those services may mean that somebody needs to come in on Saturdays to do inspections to meet those customer service requirements, and it's going to be an additional expense. But if you can address those additional expenses and make sure that you're collecting the fees based on what it's going to cost to accomplish that project, then you'll be in good shape to do that. Whether that means hiring somebody from the outside to come in on Saturdays and do your inspections for that project, or doing it himself, as you know, Dallas doing it himself. But there's going to be an additional expense when all of that stuff starts to happen as these projects go. But building departments across the state are becoming more businesslike in an effort to compete with the private industry that's out there.
So you think where we're at now, this recommendation is our best direction with what's going on now?
Like I say in the summary of this, I think this starts the city of Port Richey into the next phase of the building department and really modernizing what's coming up.
Okay.
And starting that process so that you guys can manage it in a much easier way.
All right. If I may, I was going to open it for either motion or discussion with council. Or any questions?
Well, I think we really need to move up in technology and get up where we're supposed to be. So this is time to do this. So I'd make a motion to approve the building department permit fee schedule study so that we can finally meet our obligations to the state and know exactly where our money is going.
And that's all the recommendations, including the Special Enterprise Fund?
Exactly, we'd have to do that.
Second.
Before we go any further, this is kind of a big motion from the attorneys, Mr. Matthew. Is that going to be sufficient to do what you need to do to write the ordinance and bring it back?
That's a sufficient motion for me to write the ordinance and come back. Mr. Brune is a consultant to this field. We're paying him to do this. Yes, we've already discussed the finer points of the ordinance, but he's also going to, you know, Mr. Brune was engaged, probably trying to figure out how he got engaged. It was kind of at the time, just at the last thing Mr. Lupo did, I think. I probably have to be yelling at him for a year. And So he's going to not only do the ordinance first, it's somewhat pressing, we'd like to get that done right before the end of the year. And then he's also going to help Mr. Sossaman set forth a process so we could at least get to, you know, the easiest way to get this up and running, you know what I mean? There might be some tech questions and stuff, you know, who's going to do it here. So in terms of the first step and to get the ordinance, yes, that's more than a sufficient.
And then the other concern is the motion is for clarification encompasses the reporting requirements in terms of having everything reported online so everybody can see it.
Well, the consultant's going to help us teach
Okay.
us how to do that and things like that. Right now, you're making a motion that we're going to do this fee schedule and that I'll prepare an ordinance and bring it back to you. And then
Understood.
at that point in time, Mr. Bruin will probably take us to the next step.
I just wanted to
He's
make
not,
sure that we
he's
had
not leaving us.
No, I just wanted to make sure we had everything
Yeah,
covered.
I'm good with that motion.
That having been said, at this time I wanted to open it to the general public. Nobody signed up for this particular issue, but there's some folks from the public here. Seeing no hands, we have a motion and a second. Any need for further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ladies.
Thank you. All right. Interesting.
Where are we now?
Bike. I did want to go back to, we never got into general comments from city manager or council. And I wanted to know if you guys want to skip that and finish the meeting, or if anybody wants to go and have general commentary or pass that to the end.
I have nothing I want to talk about.
I'm good.
Skip it,
Let's skip it.
move forward.
Mr. Sossaman, you good? Okay. All right, so we're going to go on to the next item, and that's going to be the consideration.
Wait.
I had signed up to speak.
Did we take commentary from the general public already?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, we've already done that.
Not on that issue. You
Oh.
spoke with Colin first,
He
and then
wants-
you immediately went into discussion
He wants to make a general comment.
Come.
with regard to the hiring.
That's correct. I didn't ask anybody's, from the public's opinion, but we didn't really have a motion. But you can come on up if you have any issues, because I think the general public should be able to weigh in on that issue as well. So, can you keep it to that issue, though?
That's what the issue is.
Okay, thank you.
Dave Mueller, 5439 Blue Point Drive. With regard to the hiring of a city manager, one of the things I'd like to see, and I believe you provided it for us, is to allow the public or the residents to participate in that process, and I appreciate that. One of the other things that I'd like consideration given is, you know, you guys trying to move fast as possible. We've already lost 2 opportunities, and now we've gone from 7 to 5. And in the process, we're potentially, somebody else may drop out. So you may want to keep those other 2 in your back pocket. It's just par for the course. Next step is, are you guys developing a matrix of questions to address maybe all of these candidates on a basis so that you can actually rate them and have some kind of input to the process, so that when you get back together, we have a process that, you know, is somewhat objective in that effort. Some of the ideas that I had is, you know, other than, you know, wanting to know somebody's education background and prior work experience, I think what we really need to focus on is leadership skills, and most importantly, what the vision for this city is, not only for the next year, next 5 or 10 years. Somebody that's willing to be a leader in that area and have some direction and mindset to drive this, some of the projects and efforts in this city in a way. You just heard a building official speak to potential growth. You had the community restaurant leaders talk about this being a happening place, a place that, you know, really is on the move. And I'm looking forward to the fact that, and I'm sure others are, let's see what we can do with this community. I think we really have an opportunity here, and you guys are at a crossroads right now to be able to drive this city in a new direction. And I appreciate your time and effort in that, and potentially pulling in these comments from the public to try to help that drive that to a new level. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Did anyone else want to speak on that issue? I did pass it over, and I forgot about that, so I apologize. Seeing no hands.
Mayor?
Yes.
While we're on that particular subject, I just wanted to let everyone know, I did distribute these in his email today on this particular subject from Michael Grimes, 5440 Quist Drive. If you want, I can read it into the record.
Well, what I wanted to do is I wanted to ask if everyone's read it, because I read the emails. Did you read? Did you read? So what I want to do is just make it part of the record, so anybody in the public can look it up if they want. It'll be here. But I think because time restrictions, that we'll put it in the record. Anyone that wants to see that or be able to see it, they'll have access to it. Is everyone okay with that?
Perfect.
Okay.
I'll include it in the minutes.
Thank you very much. Since I don't think we have any other comments on that issue, I wanted to move on to the next item for council business, which is a consideration of collective bargaining unit contract. And I'm going to turn that over to our city attorney, Mr. Matthew.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the CWA, I'm sorry, the PBA. And before you is the contract. We passed on the offer to the PBA, specifically 2% raise and $100 boot allowance, I guess. You'll find that on page 17 as well as 33. You'll see the 2%. Finance put in the revised figures there for what the officers make, and it's been ratified and signed by the union, so we're here just for the vote on the ratification for you to sign it, Mr. Mayor. So we're looking for a motion to ratify the contract.
Motion to approve
Thank you.
FYI 2021 contract agreement with PBA.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. I want to go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the first reading of ordinance 20682, which vacates the property at 8237 Hayward Lane.
I'll take that also, Your Honor.
Okay.
I presume everybody remembers this is that little odd parcel on the end of the street. I did a little homework, and I can't tell you why it wasn't done when the other one was done, as much as I looked into the file. But in any event, this is the ordinance to vacate that little piece of land. It's ordinance number 20-682, which I'm reading by title only, in the ordinance of the City of Port Richey, Florida, vacating a portion of a certain street and/or right-of-way located at the northwest end of Hayward Lane with the surrounding parcel number 292516-008000000020, providing for severability, conflicts, and effective date. Looking for a motion.
Motion to approve the first reading of ordinance 20-682.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. The next item up for discussion is going to be the discussion of vessel parking in a residential area. This was, I think, an issue that came up from one of the council members at, I believe, during the commentary section. And I wanted to know whether or not we wanted to pass some of these discussions for a lighter time, or if you guys want to handle them tonight. If you want to handle them tonight, just by way, I'll start with...
I think I brought it up, and I'm all for not discussing it tonight. But
I agree not to
Okay.
discuss it.
And it was packed in with item 8. They kind of came up together.
Let's
They're-
move them both.
And I wanted to know if you guys were comfortable moving them to another date when we had a lighter agenda.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is ask if we can move 7 or 8. It's city manager's discretion, just to when we have a lighter agenda packet.
Yeah.
With the city manager search, I think we've got a lot on our plate and some of the other things. The last item, I think, won't take too much time, so I'd ask if we can handle it. It's going to be the police department surplus of equipment, and I'm going to pass that over to Mr. Sossaman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. That item, as you indicated, I think there's some descriptions in the item, your agenda package. It's been included. Police Chief Cyrus Robinson has been going through meticulously the department. We've got some, I guess you might, for a better term, say storage closets and some other small places that were turned into storage closets over the years. A lot of the equipment in those, if not all, is outdated, hard to find replacement parts for, no longer in use, and so he has requested of me to put it on the agenda for your discussion, consideration, and hopefully you will see the light to declare it surplus tonight. And the caveat is that I think he may have some more in the future, but hopefully he's going to slow down. And he just shook his head in the negative. So, but he's getting it ship shape, and I agree with him. I think we should proceed and declare it surplus and eliminate it. And he may have something to add if you have any questions.
Only question I have is the beach warning flags. What are they?
They were purchased at some point in time. They're brand new in bags, but we don't have any use for them. We were thinking that if you grant a surplus, that may be something that we could give to local restaurants as some sort of decoration or something, since it is a beach community. They can't use them out on the water, of course, because they're not authorized to display them, but if they want to use them for any kind of decoration within their establishments, they'd be more than willing to do that.
The only question I had is the mag lights. Mag lights really don't go obsolete. Can't we use them in an emergency situation or something of that nature?
Well, that's not all of them. We did keep serviceable ones.
Oh, okay.
So those are the ones that were not serviceable.
So broken mag lights are going.
They're just,
Okay.
yeah, you can use them for certain things, but not law enforcement related.
Yeah, I'm just saying, the fire department or whatever, we lose power, so.
Right, that's why we kept all
Okay,
the
so we kept
serviceable
some,
ones and the
these are
chargers.
just more that we can't use. Gotcha, okay.
Looking for a motion and/or further discussion?
Motion to approve police department surplus equipment.
Second.
Got a motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We're going to move on to old business. I'm going to start, Mr. Casella down at the end.
I have nothing.
Mr. McClary?
I have nothing.
Nothing from here.
The only thing we had is with Nick's Park once again. But I have spoken to Commissioner Wells. He assures me that the county is going to participate on the repairs of that. And I have Mr. Johnson send over the scope of work that was required, which he has received, so we're taking the next step. So
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Sossaman, anything?
I didn't hear everything. I was asking Jim about something, but since we've had a pretty heavy agenda, I won't bring that up. There's some things I'm going to send out to you in email form tomorrow. But I have talked to Chris Martin when he was here earlier, and I'm trying to secure the actual scope of work for Nick's Park, and that was when it was started, and that didn't continue for some reason. And I've collected all the data. The attachment A that says scope of work doesn't really have a scope of work in it, so he has it, and he will be sending that to me tomorrow, and I will get that over to Pasco County for them to review, and hopefully we can pick up some more dollars to go towards some things we'd like to do out on the waterfront and WOD, if you will.
Excellent,
Can I mention something?
of course.
We did request that the department heads start to do their monthly reports, and next council meeting would be the first meeting of the month. Can we make sure that the department heads have their reports together, please?
We must have ESPN. because as soon as that was done by a consensus at the last meeting, I believe, I notified all the department heads rather than having those weekly ones that maybe drove you nuts. We will probably, since next Friday is the 30th, you will either on Friday or else the following Monday, which is the second day of November, you will be receiving those department reports in their entirety. And what will be included in that, I think it was Councilman McClary who asked us to have a financial report that would delve into the investment accounts and operating account that we have. That's going to be included in it. I've already discussed it with Tony. She's putting it together, so you will be getting all of that in one whack, so to speak.
Awesome. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion to adjourn. Great.